Hello folks, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Huggins. This is your one-stop location for workable solutions to your workplace relationship challenges. This is Situation Tuesday. This is where I'll be reading a situation dilemma or a scenario that a subscriber sent in, and I'm going to do my very best to provide some insight, tips, tools, strategies, or just provide some helpful hints on how to think through that particular situation. So let's take a look at the situation. As a director, I was brought in to build a training department and had one trainer who was particularly deficient in technology and online learning. Virtual and distance learning was part of my strategic plan for the department and part of the fiscal management of our organizational expectations. This trainer was not receptive to this transition, and regardless of the training provided, timelines established, she chose to use traditional training programs. I valued her relationship as a long-standing employee, as well as her historical knowledge of prior programs. However, I wasn't sure if keeping her was a hindrance to moving the strategic plan ahead. I was also forced to do the work I asked her to do because she began to be absent when projects were due, or out sick on important days. I chose to hire an additional trainer who was a current employee in a different department, an employee who had the respect of leadership in the organization. She also had competence with online learning and other technological training platforms. I placed them in the same office, and within months, the older employee was making progress with her expectations and began to seek out more challenges, perhaps because I spent more time with my high performer and less time with her, or perhaps she felt her job was threatened. Her behavior changed, and she stayed on as a valued employee for 2 more years. This is an awesome outcome. I got to tell you, this is a situation where it's very difficult to manage, but let me identify what the core issue is here, especially from a leadership capacity. This is a situation that requires change coaching. I'll say it again. This is a situation that requires change coaching. You know that change coaching is required when you have a performance deficit that's accompanied with a negative attitude. This type of scenario is perhaps the number one most difficult type of communication interaction that many managers, leaders, directors, supervisors face when it comes to improving the performance of a team. I'm not going to lie to you, it is a difficult, challenging, arduous process to help an employee move from step 1 to step 2 of improvement, especially when there's a negative attitude in place. But from a leadership perspective, there are certain steps that you want to take as a part of your leadership protocol, as a part of your tenure, and you want it to be a part of your skill set that you carry with you as you continue in your career. So a couple of things I want to touch upon in this particular scenario, this situation. First of all, we know that change coaching is required, and I'm going to go over the tips or the steps that are necessary to engage in change coaching with a staffer. But there was also a point here where this particular leader said, I had to end up doing her work. She wasn't there during deliverable deadlines. She was out on very specific days that were very important. Now, there are going to be times when you will have to engage in doing your people's work. But guys, I got to tell you, this should be only in emergencies where all hands on deck are required. When you find yourself in a situation where you are doing your staffer's work, that's called reverse delegation. And it actually positions you and your team to move within the realm of low performance as opposed to improved performance. So what you want to do is make sure that you stop that as quickly as you can. We call again that is reverse delegation. Reverse delegation is when you end up doing work that you've delegated out to someone else or simply doing your staff person's job. If you see that you're doing that as a matter of habit, it's actually a call for you as a leader to improve your change coaching skills. So, what is change coaching? What does it involve? Change coaching requires that you have a conversation with your staffer. And essentially what you want to do is identify the performance failure number one. So I'll say it again, identify the performance failure. What is the deficit? Have a conversation with your staffer and make sure at the beginning of that conversation you are addressing the actual deficit. During that conversation, you want to provide that staffer with feedback on how they are doing. Now, this is where you can bring in evidence, data, quota numbers, whatever you can bring in as a form of evidence to substantiate where there is that deficit. Number 3, part of change coaching requires that you discuss what we call misalignment, meaning there is the performance deficit and there is optimal performance. And you want to have a conversation identifying, but more importantly, exposing the deficit to the staffer. It's important that you not be accusatory, that you not be judgmental. If you need to use stories, if you need to use examples, that would be fine. And always use language starting with I as opposed to you. You're not doing this. You failed to do X, Y, Z. I noticed you didn't accomplish, this. Avoid that kind of language because it has you coming across as very accusatory, very negative, and it actually stimulates the staffer to become extremely defensive and shut down their listening. So it's important how you say what you say, how you deliver this message. The next thing you want to do is provide support to change. Now, let's go back to this situation. Turns out that this particular leader said, I put this employee in with a high-performing employee, and over time, this person changed her behavior and started to improve her performance. That step, that action can be construed as providing support, meaning mentoring. That would be an example of mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring, or offline or informal training. But however you want to classify it, it would be under the support category under change coaching. Now, the question we have to take a look at here, is that the ideal option for mentoring and support? Well, only you can make that decision. You would have to know the personality of your people to determine if that's the kind of support that the person would need. Many employees would be intimidated by that. It could stimulate many employees to actually fail, to actually do worse. You just never know unless you know your employee. And of course, what's also very important is what is the quality of the mentoring? Is there plenty of empathy? Is there plenty of validation of that person's efforts as they're moving towards change? So a lot of factors come into play, but at the end of the day, here's the thing. Put it on your list of options as a mentoring action. But I want you to think very carefully about what kind of support you can provide in addition to or other than that in case your situation wouldn't work out best if you went with that option. You could obviously send them to training, and that could be online or face-to-face training. You can invite them to read certain books. You can take certain times out of your schedule, out of their schedule to sit down and meet and deal with how they're dealing with their day-to-day and transitioning through the change and adapting to the new technologies. There are a number of things you can do to provide support. Providing support is your job. That is a part of your job when it comes to change coaching. Now, additionally, this is perhaps very important for most people and for most leaders, but I got to tell you, I'm going to sit here representing the staffer on the receiving end of the coaching. I'm going to sit here telling you, I need this from you. I need what's called interpersonal tactfulness and diplomacy. I'm sure you've heard it's not what you say, but how you say it that can actually break a person's spirit. Listen, if you come to change coaching angry, upset, frustrated, because this person isn't performing well, I've got to be direct here. You're the one out of line. As a matter of fact, you're not ready to have a coaching session with your staffer if you are experiencing any of those negative emotions associated with that staffer's performance. Part of your job is to provide corrective feedback and supportive feedback and continually go about the business of fine-tuning their goals. If you can't provide the corrective feedback with the right attitude, it will be negative. It will have a negative impact on the staffer. At the end of the day, you're charged with the responsibility of improving performance, meeting production goals, having results, coming to the table with results. That means how you speak to your people, how you coach your people is extremely important. Change coaching takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of skills. It requires that you exercise emotional intelligence. And so a good part of change coaching requires that you get coaching as well. If for some reason you believe you're in a situation where you need that kind of one-on-one coaching, please feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to help you out. Just to summarize, change coaching requires that you identify the performance failure, provide the feedback, discuss that realignment, make sure you're providing support to change, and make sure you do it within the framework of interpersonal tactfulness and diplomacy. Well, this was a great situation. I hope you found going through it helpful. Please feel free to send your situations forward. I'll be very happy to troubleshoot them for you. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And tell a friend, iChooseToLearn.com.